Hi guys, it's Mrs. Seitz. Today what you're going to be learning is you are going to be learning how to write equations in slope-intercept form. So far you guys have learned how to graph equations that are in slope-intercept form. So you've been given the equation and you've been asked to graph it. Now you're going to be either be given the graph or pieces of information, and you're going to be asked to come up with the original equation. So it's kind of like the flip-flop situation. All right, so what are two forms of equations of lines that we already know? We already know slope-intercept form. And remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. Another form that we already know is standard form. And remember what standard form is. It's when x and y are on the same side of the equation. So the fancy way of writing that is ax plus by equals c. Or just remember a, b, and c just are placeholders for numbers. Okay, so what two pieces of information do we need to know for slope-intercept form? Well, it's kind of like in the name, right? You need a slope and you need a y-intercept. So you need the slope, which remember stands for the variable m, and you need a y-intercept, which stands for the variable b. Okay, so let's see how we're going to take care of these problems. So it says write an equation of the line in slope-intercept form. Okay, so the two pieces of information we need are a slope and we need a y-intercept. So basically, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set up a y equals. I'm going to leave a blank for my slope. I'm going to write my x, a plus sign, and I'm going to leave a blank for my y-intercept. Okay, so in this line, the easy part is I'm going to get my y-intercept first. So remember, your y-intercept is wherever your graph crosses the y-axis. So when I look at this graph, the y-axis is crossed at -2. So my y-intercept in the problem, my b value, is equal to -2. So I'm going to plug in a -2 in this spot. All right, the next piece of information I need is a slope. So remember, your slope is your rise over your run. You could technically use slope formula also if you wanted to, but I'm going to just count it because I have a graph sitting in front of me. I know the overall shape of my graph is going downhill, so I know that the answer is going to be negative. So I'm going to start with the higher point and go down towards the lower point. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3 units. So that's 3 units down for the rise. And then 1, 2, 3, 4 units over to the right. That's a positive thing. Okay, so it looks like my slope is going to be -3/4. And again, if you wanted to use slope formula, you could calculate that with the 2 points that are given to you as well. If you didn't like counting rise over run the way that I did, you could start from the lower point and go to the higher point, right? So you could count up 3 and you could go to the left 4, but the left is towards a negative direction, so that would be -4. Doesn't matter which way you do it, you're still getting -3/4 for your slope. Okay, so the correct answer for your first equation, and I'm going to write it out, y equals -3/4 x minus 2. All right, let's take a look at the next graph. Okay, so again, we need those two pieces of information. We need the slope and we need the y-intercept. So on my graph, I'm looking, I see that my line crosses the y-axis at 3. So that means my y-intercept is 3. I'm going to count my slope with rise over run. I'm going to start at my lower point and go to the higher point. I know overall the shape of my graph is headed in a positive direction, so I know my slope is positive. I'm going to go up 1 unit and then over 1, 2, 3, 4 units. So that means my slope is 1/4 since I went up 1 and then to the right 4. So remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So you're substituting in 1/4 in for m, and you're substituting in 3 in for your y-intercept. So the final answer is y equals 1/4 x plus 3. And you can check your answers to these pretty nicely too. You could substitute in these ordered pairs to make sure you're right. So for example, if I take 4, 4, 1/4 of 4, right, is 1, and 1 plus 3 gives you your y value of 4. You could also substitute in the other value too to confirm that it's right. So the x value is 0, 1/4 times 0 is 0, and 0 plus 3 gives me my y value of 3. So it's a nice way of confirming if you're right. All right, now in the second section, you can see that you are not given a graph. So it's almost like we're kind of forced to do slope formula. So remember, slope formula is y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. And I highly recommend you label those points. So remember, this is x1, y1, x2, y2. Okay, here I go. So y sub 2, I'm going to plug that in as -1. Y sub 1 is also -1. X sub 2 is 4. And x sub 1 is 0. Okay? And remember, you can do that all right in your calculator, all as one step. So if you put the fraction button and you type it in as -1 minus -1 up top, and then on the bottom, 4 minus 0, and hit enter. Okay, that's giving me a slope of 0. All right, now let's take a look and see how I can get the y-intercept. Okay, so let's think back. If I have a y-intercept, something that I'm looking for is whenever I have a graph that hits the y-axis. When I look back at the previous problem that we just did, look at what the ordered pair is. Whenever you have a y-intercept, the x value is always 0. So one thing you always want to look for in these problems is to see if it's actually given to you in the problem. So I'm going to write that down for you guys. So y-intercept always has an x value of 0. So if you actually have that given to you, you don't have any work that's required of you. So if you look in this problem, we actually have given to us our y-intercept because they have an x value of 0 in the problem. So therefore, we don't have any work. The y-intercept is -1, and then we're going to put that together right now. So y equals m, which is 0, x plus our b is -1. Okay, but we can do a better job with simplifying that. So our final answer is, and I'm going to write this up top because I'm running out of space, y equals, well, 0x is just 0, and then 0 plus -1 is -1. So the final answer for this equation in slope-intercept form is y equals -1. And I can kind of check myself right now because look at here. Look at both of our y values. They both happen to be -1. So that means that my answer at least makes sense. Okay, let's see if we're that lucky in the next problem. All right, so did I get the y-intercept given to me this time? Do I have any x values of 0? Nope, I don't. So that means I'm going to have to do a little bit more work on this problem, but no worries, we got this. All right, so first thing though, let's get our slope. So remember, y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. All right, so here I go. So y sub 2, y sub 1, x sub 2, x sub 1. So I have 5 minus -1, and then I have 4 minus -2. Okay, and again, you can just plug that all right into your calculator if you use the fraction button. So 5 minus -1 up top, and then the bottom, 4 minus -2 on the bottom, and that's giving me a slope of 1. So I'm going to write that down. All right, now how do you get your y-intercept? Well, here's what your step is going to be. All right, we want a y-intercept So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down the equation y equals mx plus b, because that is slope-intercept form. All right, here's my next step. I know a slope value, which is 1. I'm going to plug that in for m. I also know some values for x and some values for y. Where do you find those at? Up here at the top. You actually know 2 values for x and 2 values for y. You're just going to pick one of them. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick -2, -1 as my ordered pair that I'm going to use for x and for y. So x is going to be -2, y is going to be -1, and my job right now is to solve for b, which is my y-intercept. So 1 times -2 is -2. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve for that by adding 2 to both sides, and I'm going to get a y-intercept of 1. So I have the 2 pieces of information that I need now. I have the y-intercept, which is 1, and I have the slope value, which is +1 also. So now I'm going to substitute those 2 values in. So y equals m, which is 1, x plus b, which is also 1. But I'm going to write that a little bit nicer. Y equals x plus 1. So that is sort of the more preferred way to write your answer. Okay, so again, just to kind of look back at what we did, we got our slope using slope formula. To get your answer for y-intercept, we wrote down slope-intercept form, so y equals mx plus b. We took our answer for slope, which was 1, plugged it in for m. To get your answer for b, you're taking one of the ordered pairs at the top. So I just chose the first one. You can choose the first one every time if you want to. So I chose -2, -1. -2 is the x value, -1 is the y value, plugged it in, and I solved for b. B is my y-intercept. So since I got a 1 for my y-intercept, I'm plugging that in, and then I came up with my equation in slope-intercept form. Let's try one more. All right, so let's try out part C. Okay, so again, I'm not lucky enough to have my y-intercept because I don't have a 0 given to me. So let's go through the same process we did sort of like in part B. So I'm going to do my y sub 2 minus my y sub 1. So I'm going to do -2 minus -4 all over my x sub 2 minus my x sub 1. And again, you can use your calculator to do that all for you so you don't make any sign mistakes. So push the fraction button, -2 minus -4 all over -8 minus -7. And I'm coming up with a slope of -2. Okay, so remember the next step to get your y-intercept is you're going to write down the equation y equals mx plus b. Okay, we got a slope of -2. So I'm going to plug in -2 in for m. All right, we are next going to grab maybe the first set of ordered pairs. Okay, -7 is the x value, and -4 is the y value. Our job is to find the y-intercept, which is b. Here I go. Okay, so -2 times -7 is 14. And I'm going to start solving. So I'm going to subtract both sides by 14. Okay, and I'm going to come up with a y-intercept of -18. Last step, you're going to plug those 2 values in to slope-intercept form to make an equation. So y equals -2x, and then you can just bring up the -18 or plus -18. And again, you can check those answers by substituting the point values in for x and y to see if they work. Okay, as a last step for today, we are going to be looking at two-word problems where you have to come up with an equation. This one is giving us a graph, but it's giving us two ordered pairs as well. So since the values that are given to us in the graph look like decimals, I'm going to be eventually using some slope formula, and you might want to consider that as well. All right, so let's read the problem. It says the graph shows the cost of making a long distance phone call. Write the equation that represents the cost y in dollars for a phone call lasting X minutes. Okay, so I need those two pieces of information. I'm going to go with the slope formula. I'm going to say that this is my X1 and this is my Y1. And I'm going to say this is my X2 and that's my Y2. So I'm going to do 5.36 minus 3.44 all over 9 minus 0. Okay, so let's plug that into our calculators and see what our slope is going to be. Okay, so that's 5.36 minus 3.44. And then on the bottom, I have 9 minus 0. Okay, it's giving me a crazy answer like that. I don't want that answer, so I'm going to hit the double arrow button. Okay, and it's giving me a fraction of 16 over 75. So you want to look on your calculator to see if you can find that double arrow button, because that answer is going to be a little bit more precise than that 2.213 repeating. Okay, so let's write that down as our slope, the 16 over 75. Whoops. Okay, now we want to look on our graph to see if our y-intercept is given to us. Whew, that one it is. It's given to us as 3.44. Okay, now let's write our equation. So it's y equals 16 over 75x plus 3.44. And if we think about what that actually means, it means that you start out with a cost in dollars of $3.44. Now, I know we wrote our equation with a slope that's a fraction of 16 over 75, but if we look at what the decimal is, this is 0.213 repeating. If we were talking about money, this would be around 21 cents, right? It's a little bit more than 21 cents. So maybe we might want to bump that up to 22 cents. So this would be about 22 cents per minute. So for making the long distance phone call, you would start out at $3.44, and then it would be about 22 cents per minute after that. So that's where the equation's coming from, and that's what it means. All right, last one. All right, it says you have $500 in your bank account. You earn an hourly rate at your job. After working 40 hours, you now have $860 in your account. Write an equation that represents the total amount of money Y you have in your account after working X hours. Okay, so in this problem, we don't have a graph. So what I'm assuming is we probably have some information in the problem that's going to lead us to some points. So what I want you always to do is reread that problem and see if you can figure out what the X values are and what the Y values are. So you have $500 in your bank account. You earn an hourly rate at your job, okay? After working 40 hours, you have $860 in your account. Okay, so it says represents the total amount of money, Y. So money stands for Y. And after working X hours. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I know all my ordered pairs go X, Y. I'm going to actually set it up like this. X stands for hours, and Y stands for money. So I'm going to look through the problem and see if maybe I can find some ordered pairs. Okay, look what I found. In this second sentence, after working 40 hours, I have $860 in my account. Okay, so here I go. 40 hours, I have $860. Okay, so I got that. Now let's look at that first sentence. You have $500 in your bank account. So I know that's going to be like the Y part because Y is money. But in terms of hours, I haven't worked any hours yet, right? But I'm starting out with $500. So 0 hours, $500. All right, now that I have my two ordered pairs, I'm going to figure out what my equation is so that it will tell me how much it will represent in my account after working X hours. All right, so I have 2 points. Let's go get a slope. I'll call this one X1 and this one Y1, X2 and Y2. Okay, so 500 minus 860 all over 0 minus 40. Okay, so let me plug that in my calculator. So here we go. 500 minus 860 all over 0 minus 40. Okay, I'm getting 9 for my answer for slope. And I also want to try and find my y-intercept. Ooh, look, it's given to us. If we have an x value of 0, we have our y-intercept that's given to us, so we don't have to do any work for it. All right, since I'm running out of room, I'm actually going to go to the next slide. All right, so look here, guys. We had our y-intercept of 500 given to us. So I know the two pieces of information now. I know that my slope is 9, and I know my y-intercept was 500. Okay, so let's see what this actually means. I start out with $500, right? So that's what this part is. And then I am going to get $9 per hour is what that would mean. Okay, so if we think about it, let's actually check to see if this makes sense. So the ordered pair that was given to us in the problem is if I work 40 hours, I'm going to get $860. So let's just make sure that this one makes sense. So I'm going to check this ordered pair. Here's how I'm going to check it. All right, I'm going to plug in a 40 here. So I'm going to do 9 times 40. Okay, that's 360. 360 plus 500. Yep, that gives me 860. So that means that I found the right equation. So y equals 9x plus 500 works. So again, looking back at that problem, you always want to pull out of a word problem what the x stands for and what the y stands for, and see if you can come up with some ordered pairs. When I was able to do that, I saw that x stood for hours, so it was 40, 860 since the y stood for money. And then when I looked at the first sentence, I knew since y was money and I'm starting out with $500 that this would be my time to start with. So I haven't worked any hours, so it would be 0, 500. So in looking back at today's lesson, the two pieces of information that you're always going to need to write an equation in slope-intercept form are the slope and the y-intercept. Sometimes the y-intercept is going to be given to you, perhaps in a graph, or like in these problems, it might be given to you in a point when the x value is 0. If it's not given to you, you're going to have to write slope-intercept form equation, and you're going to have to plug in using one of the ordered pairs. So I hope that was helpful to you. You have some problems that you're going to be practicing right now, but if you need some additional help, make sure you ask your teacher.